Hi. Today I wanted to talk about the 1, 4, and 5 chords in the key of C major. And these three chords, and I'll get into the numbers in just a sec, are going to be the most common chords you're going to play for most kinds of traditional music. So, just like when we were learning the notes of the major scales, you could either name the note with a letter or you could use a number counting up the notes. We can use the same numbers for chords within a key. So, if we're talking about the key of C, so here's a C note right here. We'll call that note, and that's note number one. So, one of the most or the most common chord we're going to get in the key of C is called the C chord, and we call that the number one chord. So C is the number one note in the scale, and we'll call the C chord the number one chord in the scale. And then if we count up from there, we want the other two common chords are 4 and 5. So 1, 4, and 5. So C is 1, D is 2, E is 3, and F is 4. So that's going to be our number 4 chord is the F chord. And then G is 5. And that's going to be our other common chord, chord number 5, the G chord. So chords 1, 4, and 5 in the key of C are C, F, and G. So C, to make the C chord, you put your middle finger here. We're on the A string, 3rd fret, and then you put your first finger here, 2nd fret of the D string, and then you hit all 4 pairs of strings. So you have 2 strings that are open and 2 strings that are closed with your fingers. And that's the C chord. The F chord's a little tougher. The one most folks learn when they're getting started is the index finger on the 1st fret of the E string, and then open A string, and then the 3rd fret of the D string with your middle finger, and then the 5th fret of the G string with your ring finger, which is kind of a stretch when you're just getting started, but it does make a lovely F chord. I tend to use a different F chord, which is I find easier but has a different challenge, where I take the tip of my index finger and I squash it down on 2 pairs of strings. And I'm not actually getting all 4 strings properly fretted. The outside ones are basically muted. So this one's muted, this one sounds, this one sounds, and this one's muted. But that's okay. I only need those 2 of those strings there. Some people will kind of squish their finger down to try to get all 4, but I just find it much more comfortable and easy to get to if I just squish the the tip of my finger down on the 2 pairs of strings, and then my middle finger goes up here to the 5th fret. So this is a 3rd fret of both the D and the A strings, and then my middle finger comes up here to the 5th fret on the G string. And then I don't want to play this E string. So you can either just, with your picking hand, try not to hit that E string, although I have great difficulty doing that when I'm strumming chords. I tend to hit all the strings. So what I do is I squish the back part of my index finger down onto that E string to mute it. So this takes a little practice, because if you put too much pressure on it, well, I can't do it now, but you can actually fret that string, and which you don't want either. But if you just kind of rest your finger against that pair of strings, it's muted. So I can get the other. Oops. But then this one's muted. So that's an F chord. And there's a bunch of other chords that you can use as the exact same shape where you can move it up and down. So it's quite useful if you can figure out how to mute that. If you can't, you can still use this shape and bring your pinky up and just rest it on the strings here, which is another way to mute it. So a lot of people like to do that, and some people will train their pinky to kind of mute multiple pairs of strings, which can also be useful in certain situations. I haven't learned how to do that, so I use the back of my index finger resting against the strings to mute it. So anyways, that's a couple options for the F chord. And then the G chord is much easier. So it's basically the same shape as the C chord moved up 2 strings. So that now your middle finger is on 3rd fret of the E strings, and your first finger is on the 2nd fret of the A strings, and then you hit all four strings. So again, this is the C chord. Here's an F chord, with another option being this one, and then the G chord. Or in numbers, this is chord number 1 in the key of C. This is chord number 2, or excuse me, number 4 in the key of C, and chord number 5 in the key of C. So if you're at a jam, somebody might say, this song has 1, 4, and 5 chords in the key of C, and this is what they mean: C chord, F chord, and G chord. So let's practice that. And to strum it, there's lots of different ways you can strum chords with the mandolin. One simple way that I'd recommend starting with is if you're in a 4/4 time, where there's 4 beats to the measure, I would just hit the lowest string, the G string, on beats 1 and 3, and then I would strum all the strings on beat 2. So for instance, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And on the 3 and the 4, you could just hit it down, or you could kind of hit it down and up. I tend to hit it down and up. So 1, 2, and 3, 4, and 1, 2, and 3, 4, and. So let's try that. Let's do a chord progression with the 1, 4, 5 chords in the key of C, where we do a couple of measures of chord number 1, the C chord, a couple of measures of chord number 4, the F chord, a couple measures of chord number 1, the C chord, and a couple of measures of chord number 5, the G chord, and then another couple of measures of chord number 1, the C chord. And this would be a pretty common chord progression in a lot of kinds of traditional music. So I'll just count us in here: 1, 2, 3, 4. Now onto the F chord, chord number 4. Now back to chord number 1, the C chord. Now to chord number 5, the G chord. Now back to chord number 1, the C chord. Great. Thanks for that, and let me know if you have any questions.